Good evening. Good to have y'all with us tonight. We're going to be closing, bringing an end to the series on the patriarchs tonight, and we're going to be delving into, I think, probably one of the greatest characteristics, great as in the biggest characteristic of the modern state of Israel, and it goes back into the Old Testament as well. Two things that I'll relate as we get into this. The first is I have two personal experiences with Israel in the regard that we're going to be taking a look at tonight. The first took place in 1972 in the Olympics in Munich. I had just arrived in Germany. I was in the army at the time. I just arrived, and Black September had kidnapped the Israeli athletes, and they had just been killed. I arrived in country, and one of the first things that I had to do was stand guard duty because they were thinking that they were going to try to attack the base where we were at as well. Second incident took place when I was in the Navy. Our carrier went into Haifa, Israel, and there we met with Israeli pilots, and they were kind of briefing us on what they were doing. And at that time, it was pretty easy to see that they were the most elite pilots in the world at that point in time. And the reason was because they were flying combat missions about every day. In Afterburner, an Israeli jet could fly across their country in 45 seconds. That's how small it was, and that's how fast their planes were. Also, they were not practicing, they were flying actual missions, dogfighting 50 feet off the ground. And so they were doing this constantly, all the time. The point is, they were good at what they did, and they loved to fight. And that's what we're going to take a look at tonight. Let's bow for a word of prayer if we could. Father, thank you for the folks that are gathered together tonight as a family. We ask and pray that you'd please bless the music, stir our hearts with it, and then I pray that you'd please prepare us for the preaching of your word. Bless your people now in Jesus' name. Amen.
Good evening. Let's all stand, turn in our hymnals to 457. To God be the glory. Let's sing the first person chorus of hymn 457.
not yet discovered, grace not yet uncovered, grace from his bountiful store, grace to cross the river, grace to face forever. There'll be new grace I've not needed before. There's been grace for every trial. There's been grace for every mile. There's been grace sufficient from his vast supply. Grace to make my heart more tender. Grace to love and pray for sinners. But there'll be new grace when it's my time to die. Grace not yet discovered, grace not yet uncovered, grace from his bountiful store, grace to cross the river, grace to face forever. There'll be new grace I've not needed before. Yes, there'll be new grace I've not needed before.
Okay, let's take our Bibles tonight. Turn to Genesis chapter number 49. And tonight we're going to go over, I think, one of the primary reasons why Israel is hated so much. One reason, obviously, is because they are, whether people like it or not, they are in fact referred to as God's chosen people. And therefore there's a spiritual side to this thing that just puts Israel in the crosshairs. But a second reason why there's a lot of folks in this world who really do not like Israel is because when you mess with Israel, they will retaliate. They are going to hit back if they're punched first, or if they think they're going to get punched first, they will strike first. I want to bring a message tonight on the subject of the warrior. When war breaks out in a country, there's basically three kinds of soldiers who eventually find their way onto the battlefield. The first is what I would call the reluctant warrior. This would be a soldier like Sergeant York of World War I fame. He was a Christian, and he was trying to reason out this commandment of thou shalt not kill. And he was struggling with this. Went to meet with his pastor to get some insight. He sat down with his commanding officer to get his side of things. He eventually came to the place where he resolved that inner struggle. He went on to become the most decorated soldier of World War I and the recipient of the Medal of Honor. The second kind of warrior that you're going to find on the battlefield, I would call the excited warrior. And this is best portrayed by Audie Murphy. He was trying desperately to get into the military so as to be able to fight in World War II. He was just like so many thousands of other men and women who were enlisting just because they wanted to get involved in this fight. But he tried to enlist into the Marines, and he was rejected. He tried to enlist in the Navy. They wouldn't take him either. He was turned down to be a paratrooper because he was too short. He stood 5 foot 5.5 inches. In order to finally be accepted into the Army, he convinced his sister to lie about his age. He was only 17 years old. And he finally made it to boot camp. He was so excited, and yet the excitement of war soon faded as so many of his friends were killed. He became the most decorated soldier of World War II. He was awarded the Medal of Honor, and then he spent the rest of his life suffering from PTSD and nightmares. There are some soldiers who are reluctant to fight. There's a lot of people initially who are excited with the prospect of being in combat. And then there are some who fall in love with the thrill of combat. These are the individuals that are calculating, stone-cold warriors who seem to be born to a life of violence and conflict. Adrian Carlton Dewart was from England, who served his country in 3 different wars while rising to the rank of general. He fought in the Boer War in South Africa by quitting his life as a student in college, and he snuck off to join the military. In that engagement, he was shot in the stomach and the groin. Recovering from his wounds, he then returned to the fight. He remained in the army when World War I broke out, and while he was fighting in Somalia, he was shot in the face twice. He lost his left eye and part of his ear. He recovered and rejoined the fight. While fighting on the Western Front, he was shot 7 more times. He was shot through the skull and the ankle in one battle. He was shot in the hip in another battle, then in a leg in another battle, and then in his ear in a different battle. By the time that war was over, he lost his left hand in a battle. The doctor who was trying to take care of him refused to remove the mangled fingers on his hands, so he just pulled them out. He was awarded the Victoria Cross, the British equivalent of the Medal of Honor for gallantry. And at the end of the war, after having been wounded so many times, he confessed that he actually enjoyed it. At the beginning of World War II, he was on a top secret mission and was leaving Yugoslavia when his aircraft lost both engines. The plane went down and he had to bail out. He was captured by the Italians, and during his time as a POW, he made 7 attempts to escape. One time he succeeded, and then he was captured 8 days later. The problem that he had was he was wearing an eye patch. He only had one hand. He had a lot of scars, and he didn't speak Italian. And so he was recaptured. He finally retired from the military in 1947. He died at the age of 81, and he loved every minute of the wars that he fought in. It is a rare breed of a warrior that now brings us to one of the most unlikely warriors of all, that being Jacob's youngest son, Benjamin. Genesis chapter 49, verse 27. First thing we see about this individual tonight, he was a warrior that relied upon the element of surprise. Benjamin shall raven as a wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. I can imagine that as Jacob finally made his way through the brothers, giving a prophecy, sometimes a word of encouragement to each one, he finally arrived at his youngest son, Benjamin, and described him, of all things, as a wolf. And I can just about imagine how his brothers were listening to each one of the brothers being dealt with by dad. Some things were good, some things not so good. And then he comes to Benjamin, describing their youngest brother as a wolf. Now keep in mind, I think it's natural that family members have a tendency to kind of just discount certain siblings that they have. Same thing happened to the Lord, as you recall in Matthew 13, verse 57. The Lord even mentioned, it said, He said, a prophet is not without honor, save in his own country and in his own house. And just as the Lord's brothers and sisters took a very dim view of him, so it would only be natural for Benjamin's brothers to not see him as anything other than the youngest brother and therefore the least. Remember years earlier when the brothers all hated Joseph, they were planning on killing him. The reality is that only 10 of those brothers hated Joseph. 10 of them wanted him dead. But Benjamin was not part of the plot. He wasn't involved in the conspiracy. The reason was he was Joseph's full brother. He knew nothing of what they were planning on doing. And while the brothers clearly resented Joseph because of how much his father loved him, it was really the same story when it came to Benjamin. In Genesis chapter 42 and verse number 3, the Bible there says, and Joseph's 10 brethren went down to buy corn in Egypt, but Benjamin, Joseph's brother, Jacob sent not with his brethren, for he said, lest peradventure mischief befall him. Now, years later, when Joseph had become the prime minister of Egypt, Jacob sent 10 of his sons to go to Egypt to be able to buy food. There was a famine in the land, and so Jacob sent 10 of his sons on a long trip that he viewed as being very, very dangerous. And he decided to keep Benjamin at home, to keep him safe. Safe from what? Well, the brothers could have been robbed or killed or imprisoned. Jacob knew that this was a dangerous trip, but a necessary one. But whatever might happen to those 10 sons, Jacob was going to make sure that the baby of the bunch was safe at home. The idea here is that when Jacob was on his deathbed and issuing the prophecies and blessings to his sons, it would not have made any sense at all that Jacob would describe Benjamin as a wolf. He was the baby of the family. He was the one who was tucked into bed every night by their dad, a child who was sheltered and pampered while the other sons were all facing danger. And that describes one of the greatest qualities of a warrior. It's their ability to fly under the radar, to disguise their deadliness as just being normal. Christ was rejected by his siblings for years simply because to them, he didn't look like what they envisioned a Messiah to look like. Gideon didn't even look like a threat or any part of a warrior or a future judge of Israel. He was simply secretly threshing wheat, hoping to remain hidden. Goliath was the towering giant who was intimidating. And yet it was that young shepherd, David, who eventually cut off the giant's head. And so it was with Benjamin, the youngest, spoiled son of Jacob, who was described by his father as being a wolf. And yet it wasn't so much what Jacob saw as what God saw in this young man. Again, chapter 49, verse 27, second thing tonight. He was a warrior that relied upon the instincts of a warrior. Benjamin shall raven as a wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. The word raven means to tear apart. And it's describing the cold-hearted nature of the kind of warrior that he would become. Some of you older folks might remember the horror film of the 1940s called The Wolfman. It became a classic. A young man was bitten by a wolf, and once a month during a full moon, the man would then be transformed into a wolf that would attack and kill people. When he came to the next morning, he would discover that person that he killed, but he couldn't remember doing so. He'd become a beast, not recalling anything that he did, And he dreaded the next full moon because he knew it would happen again. Benjamin had become that kind of a warrior that simply followed his instincts. He knew how to fight and became a deadly warrior in the process. When it was time to fight, he was transformed into a kind of a wolf that was deadly. So what is it about a wolf that made God see this young man as a wolf? A wolf is known for their cunning and intelligence. When faced with a puzzle of how to get food in a laboratory, wolves are compared with dogs to determine how each one of them is going to try to find a solution. And wolves are a whole lot smarter than dogs. Dogs will typically give up and wait for help from a human, while wolves will continue to use trial and error until the problem is solved. Wolves are also highly observational. They will learn from their fellow pack members and even watch how other animals find success, and then they copy what they have seen other animals do. When hunting a larger animal, wolves will take turns leading the pack, chasing down a larger animal so that they can put on the sprint. When they get tired, they drop to the back and allow another wolf to then start sprinting after the beast that they're hunting. They create strong social bonds as members of a pack. Unlike most other animals, wolves will adopt pups into their pack whose parents have been killed. And by doing so, they create a very tight-knit tribe of Benjamin, was the result here, that would pit them against all the other tribes of Israel if need be. Wolves are also famous for their physical endurance and stamina. Wolves can travel at a speed of 5 miles an hour for hours on end. They can travel up to 45 miles in a single day just searching for food. And when needed, they can run up to 40 miles an hour. And if need be, wolves can swim up to 8 miles at a time. And to aid them while hunting, their sense of smell is 100,000 times more than a human. Their hearing is so keen that they can hear noises up to 10 miles away. They don't learn how to do these things. They're just part of their makeup. And that's how Benjamin was when it was time to go to war. He created a tribe of warriors who were beyond exceptional. These warriors never got tired of fighting. They never counted themselves out of a fight. And the reason was because they knew that their own people would have their back. But while all of these qualities were instinctive and came about naturally, they could also become a liability. Turn, if you would, to Judges chapter number 20. Third thing tonight about the tribe of Benjamin is this. Benjamin was a warrior who built a tribe of warriors. In Judges chapter 19, there's a story of an unfaithful wife who had an affair. She left her husband and went back home to stay with her father. Knowing where she was, her husband then followed after her, came to her father's house, and convinced her to come back home. After a time, she agreed to do so. When they left her dad's house, they traveled to the point of darkness, and then they came to a town called Gibeah. They were approached by an old man who saw them basically going to sleep in the street. He encouraged them to come home with him because he told this couple, "You're not safe out here. This can be a dangerous town." He invited them to his home. They agreed to go. And later that night, some perverts came to where they were staying and demanded for the husband to be turned over to them to be raped. When the owner of the house refused to do so, the perverts then took the man's wife and raped her to death. The husband then cut her corpse into pieces and sent a piece to each of the tribes of Israel, asking them for justice. All of the tribes agreed that the town of Gibeah needed to turn those perverts over. The demand was made because those men needed to be punished and killed. But there was a problem. The reason was because Gibeah was in the land of Benjamin. And Benjamin had a wolf-like quality, a pack mentality. And nobody is going to attack the pack. And therefore, they decided that they were going to protect and shelter those perverts. The entire nation of Israel, all of the other tribes, were ready to go to war over this thing. And in Judges chapter 20 and verse number 12, the Bible there says, "And the tribes of Israel sent men through all the tribe of Benjamin, saying, What wickedness is this that is done among you? Now therefore deliver us the men, the children of Belial, which are in Gibeah, that we may put them to death and put away evil from Israel. But the children of Benjamin would not hearken to the voice of their brethren, the children of Israel. But the children of Benjamin gathered themselves together out of the cities unto Gibeah to go out to battle against the children of Israel." So what we have here is a matter of family putting ahead this matter of doing right. And that was going to put the entire tribe of Benjamin against all the other tribes of Israel. Is family important? Well, sure it is. But family doesn't come before doing right. And Benjamin, the warrior tribe, was not going to allow any of the other tribes or any of their members to be punished, even though they were in the wrong. And then came the insanity of this warrior kind of mentality that maintains me against the world. In chapter 20 and verse 15, "And the children of Benjamin were numbered at that time out of the cities 26,000 men that drew sword, beside the inhabitants of Gibeah, which were numbered 700 chosen men. Among all this people there were 700 chosen men left-handed. Everyone could sling stones at an hairbreadth and not miss. And the men of Israel, beside Benjamin, were numbered 400,000 men that drew sword. All these were men of war." So from reading that passage, let's take inventory of what's about to take place. The tribe of Benjamin is refusing to turn over the perverts, and the tribe of Benjamin had a grand total of 26,000 very skilled fighters. But the other tribes were able to muster together 400,000 armed men. That comes out to about 15 to 1. That's not a lopsided battle. That's going to be a massacre. And it was all because of Benjamin's unwillingness to turn over some perverts who were part of their family. Back in 2012, Elliot Turner got into an argument with his girlfriend while they were at his parents' house. He became so angry and upset with her that he strangled her to death. Elliot then wrote a letter confessing what he had done. He was so filled with remorse, he was ready to turn himself in. And that's when his parents discovered what had happened. They destroyed his letter of confession. They got rid of the jacket that he was wearing when he killed his 17-year-old girlfriend, and they tried to cover it all up. The police suspected Elliot of killing the girl, and so they bugged the Turner's home where they heard Elliot's parents talking about the murder. Elliot was arrested and convicted of murder, and his parents were also convicted and sentenced to 27 months in prison for helping their son to hide a crime. Now that's dumb, but it's not half as stupid as what the tribe of Benjamin was about to do. They were willing to fight to the death to protect a bunch of homosexual perverts. And the reason is because a warrior knows how to fight, but not always when to fight or when to walk away. So how did this battle turn out? It was worse than the tribe of Benjamin could have imagined. Not only were they grossly outnumbered, but they had also created another enemy. Chapter 20, verse 23. And the children of Israel went up and wept before the Lord until even, and asked counsel of the Lord, saying, shall I go up again to battle against the children of Benjamin, my brother? And the Lord said, go up against him. It doesn't matter how talented or gifted a person might be, because when they're choosing to do wrong, they will always find themselves fighting against God. It would seem that this is the greatest weakness of these people who love to fight. They enjoy the fight so much that they lose sight of who they're fighting against. And that brings us to one of the most famous Benjamites of all, King Saul. He too had a warrior's heart. He was willing to go to war against the Canaanites, especially the Philistines. But while he displayed courage in battle, he fell into the same trap in that he was always ready for a fight. But he lost sight of who he was supposed to be fighting. And that is how he ended up rebelling against God as well as trying to fight against David. Saul knew how to fight, but not when. And from there, it is a short trip to fighting against God. Turn, if you would, to the book of Esther, chapter number 2. Next thing tonight about Benjamin and the tribe that he founded. He was a warrior who created legends. In every nation, there exists a person who chose to put their nation ahead of their own welfare. In Scotland, that legendary person was William Wallace. He was the co-leader of the famous Stirling Bridge Battle, where the much larger English army was defeated by the Scots. But William Wallace was unable to pull off another miracle the following year, and the Scots were defeated at the Battle of Falkirk. Wallace continued his raids against the British for another 5 years until he was betrayed by a Scottish knight. He was captured, taken to England, where he was drawn and quartered, with his head dipped in tar and then placed on a spike on London Bridge. In Poland, a little-known hero of World War II was a Polish officer named Witold Pilecki. He worked for the liberation of Poland after Hitler had invaded his country. The Polish underground informed him that they needed a volunteer to slip into Auschwitz, to be captured, to become an eyewitness to the accounts of the murders that were taking place there. Pilecki volunteered to be captured and sent there. Once inside the camp, he began setting up a resistance group, preparing them for the eventual liberation by the Allies. He remained in Auschwitz for the next 2 years, barely surviving while also keeping track of the murderous events. When ordered to do so, he then escaped from the camp, made his way to London, where he spent weeks putting in writing the various accounts of the atrocities. When he presented his written findings, they were dismissed by the Allies because they were too unbelievable. How could one human being treat another person that way? Too unbelievable, and so he returned to Poland, where he continued to fight the Nazis. After the war, the Soviets took over Poland They installed a communist government who viewed Pilecki as a dangerous threat. Instead of being treated like a hero fighting for the freedom of the Polish people, he was arrested, sent to a Soviet camp, and tortured to death. And that brings us to three legendary heroes, all from the tribe of Benjamin. The first was Mordecai. In Esther chapter 2 and verse 5, now in Shushan the palace, there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. Mordecai was a Jew living in Persia, and he was instrumental in doing three things of great significance. The first is he saved the king's life. Some assassins had marked the king to be killed, and it was Mordecai who found out the plot, revealed it, and the king's life was spared. The second thing that he did was he took a stand against a Haman, because Haman was an evil man. Unfortunately, Haman had the king's ear, and yet Mordecai was still willing to stand up against this individual. And the third thing that he did that was of great significance, he raised Esther as if she was his own daughter. He was an older cousin, and yet he raised Esther to have a tender heart and wanting to serve the Lord. The second legendary Benjamite was Esther. Her huge claim to fame in this matter came about because of her willingness to listen to her cousin Mordecai. When it was revealed that Haman had this plan to annihilate and wipe out all of the Jews, she initially wanted to play it safe. Mordecai rebuked her for wanting to be safe, hiding her own Jewish identity. And in the process of that rebuke, Mordecai lit a fire in her that led her to the place where her people became more important than her own life. And then came forth one of the greatest statements in the Bible. While giving instructions as to what needed to be done by the Jewish people, she said this in Esther chapter 4 and verse 16. Her instructions were, go, gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise. And so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. And that brings us to the last legendary Benjamite, the Apostle Paul. In Philippians chapter 3 and verse number 4, the Bible there says, Paul speaking, though I might also have confidence in the flesh, if any other man thinketh that he hath whereof he might trust in the flesh, I more. Circumcised the 8th day, of the stock of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, and Hebrew of the Hebrews, as touching the law of Pharisee, concerning zeal, persecuting the church, touching the righteousness which is in the law, blameless. But what things were gained to me, those I counted loss for Christ. In that passage, Paul is here giving his spiritual credentials that on a human level he was quite proud of. And in the midst of those fleshly trophies was the fact that he was from the tribe of Benjamin, the warrior tribe. What Paul was saying was that he too was a fighter. He was willing to fight for his being the apostle to the Gentiles, even though he was not recognized as such. He was willing to even fight against the apostle Peter when he disrespected the Gentile Christians in the church at Antioch. Paul was a man on a mission who never walked away from a fight that needed to be fought. And one of the many reasons why he was the way that he was is because he was from the warrior tribe. Paul was like a wolf. Turn back to Genesis 49 and verse 27. And that verse again tells us this: Jacob giving the prophecy, revealing how God saw this young man. And God's description was, Benjamin shall raven as a wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. There are three things found in this verse that perfectly describe the ministry of the Apostle Paul. First is the fact that he was willing to tear apart any and every stronghold of the devil. The word raven again means to tear apart. And that is what Paul intended to do whenever he was facing idol worship or cities that were in Satan's grip, the worst of which was the city of Corinth. But instead of just walking away from that city, Paul chose to go soul winning there, choosing even to start a church there in one of the most wicked cities in that region. Secondly, the wolf is described as devouring the prey in the morning. A wolf is constantly on the prowl to find food and starts his search as soon as he wakes. And that is how Paul was driven in the ministry. He was tireless in looking for lost people to win to Christ. He had so many battles that he was willing to fight while he was searching for his next convert. Always willing to fight to preach the gospel to the lost, searching constantly for those people who were willing to get saved. And finally, the wolf spent the night dividing its spoil. This could refer to the churches that Paul planted in Ephesus, Philippi, and elsewhere. Some of his happiest days of the ministry were spent in Ephesus, where he started a church and he was able to remain there for more than 2 years, taking the time to love those people, to pastor them without having to travel during that time frame. The dividing of the spoil, however, could also refer to the twilight years of his ministry. As he got older, his eyesight was failing because of the thorn in the flesh. He was imprisoned in Rome, and the spoils of his ministry were in the books of the Bible that he had written. Regardless of the exact interpretation, it's clear that when Paul came to the end of his life, he faced it like a warrior. In 2 Timothy chapter 4, he said this, I have fought a good fight. I've finished my course. I've kept the faith. What exactly is a good fight? Paul wrote those words from a prison cell. He was about to become a martyr, to be beheaded. He's claiming to have fought a good fight. What exactly is that? A good fight is not one that you necessarily win. King Leonidas and his 300 Spartans fought a good fight against more than 1 million Persians. A good fight is one that needs to be fought. And regardless of the outcome, you did not quit. You stood your ground for as long as you could. And if the victory is not discovered or seen in this lifetime, then you know that it will be in the life to come. And that's why Paul concluded by saying, henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give me at that day, and not to me only, but unto all them also that love his appearing. Let's bow for prayer. Father, we ask and pray tonight that you would give us discernment because there are some battles that need to be fought. And there's a lot of battles that should not be. And we ask and pray that you'd give us the heart of a warrior, and then a heart that would allow us to take a stand when we need to. A heart that will fill us with courage as we take a battle that perhaps we did not choose as our own, but one that you're wanting to be fought. And we ask and pray that you'd give us discernment to never lose sight of who and what we're fighting. Our heads are bowed and our eyes are closed. Do we have anyone here tonight not sure about their salvation? You'd like for us to pray for you? Slip your hand up if you would, and we'll do that very thing. All right, let's all stand. Our heads are bowed and our eyes are closed. Right now the music begins to play. The altar is open, and we invite you to come.
Good. Be seated if you would, please. I have a few things I need to share with you. Ushers, let's just hold this for 1 second. I'll get to here in just a minute. This Saturday we've got ladies' breakfast and shopping coming up. So, ladies, we want you to be here for this. We're asking that you meet at church here at 8:30 this Saturday and bring a breakfast dish that you can share, and we'll have a good time of fellowship together. And ladies will be going shopping. If you need a ride for that, please see Mrs. Willoughby. She can get you set up. Now, for tonight, we had soul winning in there. We've had our different events taking place. We need to get this set up. If anybody would be willing to stay tonight, it's not a lot of work, but if we get a few people in there to help get tables and chairs set up, get the table covered down for this event. As soon as we dismiss, if you could head straight back to the fellowship hall, Brother Castle will meet you in there and get that going. We'd sure appreciate that. Also, we have got coming up the Married Couples Retreat, and I need to give you some information on this. Fellas, come on down. Let's make sure that all the couples get one of these flyers. We had an event take place that I don't think any of us expected, and that is torrential rain. What that has to do with the retreat is, if you've watched the news, you've seen that the White River exceeded its banks enormously, more than anybody would have guessed. And the train that we were going to ride runs right alongside that. Initially, I tried to get a hold of them, find out what their status is. They were just literally flooded and not answering the phone. The website didn't show much. Well, they finally contacted us. Unfortunately, the track has washed out in many areas. They had floodwaters up inside the train engines, and so all those have to be torn apart and rebuilt. Bottom line is that train will not run for quite some time. They were estimated to be several $1 billion to get the train back up. So that throws a bit of a hamper on that. However, the very same distance away from the hotel is the National Air Force Museum. And so we want to keep things on track. We'll maintain the retreat, but as opposed to the train ride to Metamora, we'll all head over to the Air Force Museum. If you've never been there, you need to go. It's just a great, great event. It is Lord knows, and we're gonna press on. If you have any questions, please see me about that. And then also, we have got a rummage